Hello, I'm Ángel Vázquez from the University of the Balearic Islands in Spain, and I'm the co-author of this communication. This communication deals about the Spanish students' perceptions of their school science classes and some additional comparisons across several variables in order to update affective data on science education from the voice of the protagonists, the students. In fact, the affective and attitudinal goals related to STEM education have been investigated for years. And the results show some kind of low relevance of science education, which is probably the biggest obstacle to good science and technology learning and interest. So positive attitudes towards science and technology are also important in themselves as a learning objectives. In fact, in the last years, teams and PISA are starting to acknowledge the importance of socio-affective factors related to learning. In fact, PISA 2018 reports that hardly 32% of Spanish students expect to work in science-related jobs. The theoretical and methodological background are drawn from the elaborations and contribution of the relevance of science education second Rose's project from its antecessor, the Rose 2002 project, and from related literature. In fact, Rose 2002 gave voice to students to diagnose their attitudes to science and technology worldwide, and the Western countries displayed an overall pattern of disenchantment with science and technology and big gender differences. Spanish teens fit somewhat this pattern, yet the gender gap displayed the lowest differences among Western countries. Some current literature confirms that these challenges may still persist over the world. Recently, a new wave called Rose Second, thereafter Roses 2020, has been launched worldwide to update young people's attitudes towards science, and this paper presents some first results of Spanish students' perceptions on science and present also some comparisons. A convenient sample of 122 Spanish students validly answered the Rose 2020 questionnaires, and this sample involves 78 boys and 64 women and 10 non-identified, and the age average has been about 15.3 years. The participants attend 4 public and 2 public-funded private secondary schools that are located at 5 different Spanish cities. A group of science education experts developed the Roses 2020 questionnaires to empirically gather young people's affective data about several in- and out-of-school experiences across 8 scales and several additional sociocultural and open items. These communications presents the answer to the scale labeled My Science Class, which involves 12 items. The items develop different aspects of school science experiences through direct, simple, and short statements that avoid negative wording. Students are asked to answer each item by ticking the appropriate box on a 4-point Likert scale. Disagree to agree according to their appreciation of the statements. The students anonymously answered the online Spanish Rose 2020 questionnaires as a class assignment and were allowed to leave some items unanswered. The researchers and the students' teachers managed the questionnaire administration, the online links, and the students' questions that were gathered in specific reports on the application process. The data gathering took place from April to June 2020 when the schools were closed and the students were taught online because of the pandemic. The student responses on each item are codified as 1 disagreement, 2, 3, and 4 agreement points to compute weighted averages that allow simple and faithful representation of a student's opinions. The descriptive statistics of student responses are summarized in the table. On the scale of my science class, we have to note that one item, the first, has a negative format, so the meaning of the scores must be reversed to be correctly understood. And the item 12 was not involved in Rose's 22. Overall, the two items that reach the lowest average score are item 10 to become a scientist and item 12 to get a job in technology, and the two items that reach the highest agreement average are item 2, science, school science is interesting, and the item 7, the curiosity of science. Perhaps in this picture is better seeing this kind of max and minimum scores. This dia shows the difference, the gender difference between girls and boys. Overall, only two items display significant difference, which are item 12 and item 8. The remaining items do not display any significant difference, so we have to conclude that the gender difference among Spanish students are quite low. Another important data in this picture is that girls outperformed boys on liking to become a scientist or to get a job in technology. This means that the vocational gap being low for girls and boys, the main news are that girls outperform boys in their intention about science and technology. This picture displays the time comparison between Rose's 2020 and Rose 2002. And the comparison involves just the first 11 items of both waves because they were the items who has an exact wording in both waves. So the first finding of this picture is that the comparison shows that the structure of student responses to my science class are quite similar across both waves. Both depict parallel profiles along the items. The relative maximum and minimum points are placed on the same items. For instance, students' willingness to be a scientist or to get a job in technology are the lowest ones, and roughly display the same scores at both waves. Further, the lines along the intermediate items are broadly parallel between the two waves. The apparent exception of item 1 is not so, as the item wording is negative. Science is difficult, so that the score meaning should be reversed. That is, students currently perceive science more easy than rows 2002. Further, students' mean score about science interesting present the maximum for both waves, and it also shows the largest difference between rows 2020 and rows 2002, and the effect size is about half a standard deviation. So the conclusions of this communication, the main conclusion is that we have got overall similar profile of students' opinions on science classes that had already been got in rows 2002. The highest score indicator are placed on interest and importance of science and curiosity. The lowest scoring indicators are the intention to be a scientist or to get a job in technology, the vocational gap, and the main news are that Rose's 2020 students' scores are higher than Rose 2002 scores for most indicators, so students' perceptions of science classes have become more positive than were before. The other important finding is that gender differences are small, and a nuance. Spanish girls outperform boys on liking to become a scientist or to get a job in technology. And the intention of students to choose a science subject next year significantly outperform their mates on most items of my science classes. Thus, this study relates to the conference theme as it intends to transform science and technology education through student-centered and evidence-based pedagogies according to the findings. And so it fosters participatory citizens on the basis of a scientific education better adapted to people living in an uncertain world. Finally, some limitations. These results are trendy and tentative, as the sample size is still tiny. The work is currently in progress. We are looking for some follow-up through far future larger samples. Thanks for your attention.